Thank you for tuning in to Going the Distance. I'm Jill Consor-Beck, founder of Go Long, a coaching service designed to help women over 40 cut through the clutter and learn to become the best version of themselves. On each episode of Going the Distance, I have a chat with an expert in a field that's pertinent to my clients and Substack subscribers. And this episode is no different. On this episode, we welcome Heather Redisch, founder of Adulting 101 Masterclass. While she's based in Chicago, she works with people everywhere. So Heather, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here and glad we finally got this to work.
Thank you, Jill. I'm so happy to be here. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad we finally got this worked out too.
Yeah. So tell us how you got here.
Yeah. So recruiting, talent management, human capital management, that's been human resources. That's really been the bulk of my profession for over 25 years. And I still practice it to this day. I noticed about 5 years ago that there was this lack of confidence in my entry-level college grads and how they were interviewing with me. I had friends who were reaching out just to see if I could help, just coach, if you will, as their kids were graduating. And a lot of these kids are actually some that I know personally. And when I would get on the phone, I would just notice, whether it was over Zoom, in person, or on the phone, that there was just this awkwardness that they were having a really hard time overcoming. I understand that interviewing is awkward in general, and I talk about that a lot, but eventually you kind of warm up and get into the interview, and there's just something missing with that experience now. And I just kind of kept taking note of it. I also, because I am hiring for companies and I'm hiring all different Gen Z candidates, I was noticing it, in my own professional way as well. And I read a book around the same time by an author, Jonathan Haidt. And Jonathan Haidt wrote the book, The Anxious Generation. The reason why I actually read it was because I have 3 girls and my youngest is 10, and I am trying to hold off as long as humanly possible on giving her a phone. Jonathan Haidt has really created a movement within really not only the United States, but globally, of getting phones out of kids' hands and social media. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of high schools and middle schools and elementary schools have now come up with policies about not bringing phones to school or locking them up. And when I was reading his first chapter, he was talking about how in 2007, that was the launch of a smartphone. And all of those, kids in puberty who were already feeling awkward and insecure, we gave them this phone that then completely heightened everything that they were experiencing. But at the time, we had absolutely no idea what kind of long-term effects it would be. And as Jonathan Haidt said, we sent them to Mars without even realizing we sent them to Mars. And I had this epiphany in that moment because I was thinking back to all of these interviews that I've had with my entry-level college grads, which I have been doing throughout the course of my career. And I thought that would probably explain a bulk of why the confidence is lacking, because they were handed a phone in puberty or younger. And all of a sudden, you really don't need to talk to adults, interact with adults. You're going straight to your friend. And you also have the camera and, videotaping yourself and all of these kind of experiences that you weren't necessarily, understanding were coming down the pike, which kids today know. They just went to Mars. And so with that, coupled with COVID, and this thing which Jonathan Haidt also talks about, which is called overparenting, and how the parents nowadays are just very involved, and they're overly involved and navigating life for their kids rather than letting them navigate life. I decided to start this business called Adulting 101 Masterclass. And it really just takes a lot of the areas of which I know as transitioning from college to adulthood that, these young adults, college isn't teaching them. They need to know. They need to understand how to interview, how to network. They need to understand how to have uncomfortable conversations with people, even though they want to just email and text. They need to understand what their paycheck is about. When I would extend offers, they wouldn't really understand the breakdown and why taxes were coming out. And I want to help them in building a budget based on what their actual income is. A lot of students who are graduating have had 504s or IEPs, so they have.
What's a 504? Just for
so a 504 So a 504 and IEP are supports within the educational system for kids, depending on the severity of perhaps their learning disability or their ADHD, and a lot of it goes around being productive in the workplace, but also executive functioning. And executive functioning is extremely challenging for those who have ADHD, who are working and trying to manage their personal time and their professional time. And so the list kind of goes on how to navigate this major transition into your 20s that, there's no book for, right? There's no real rules and real right way. So that's really the impetus of how this all started. And I'm just kind of cranking away and helping students one-on-one, as well as in cohorts, as well as I go internally and do corporate trainings.
So, all right, I have this shirt. It's my husband's shirt. I think it's like on point here.
Adultish. Yeah. Love it.
I say a lot of times I'm married to like an oversized child, but he's actually great. But I just thought the shirt would be funny to bring out. But yeah. I think, though, that in some respects, it's like physically they're adults, but maybe not emotionally they're caught up there yet. What I found was interesting in terms of your story is that you said this was 5 years ago, but stuff before then was happening. So this was even before COVID. You were noticing this trend around awkwardness around interviewing. So I graduated college in 93, so I did a bunch of interviewing, that initial interviewing in 92, even 91 for some internships. And it was awkward for me, especially because I came from a middle-class background. I was at an in-state university, and I didn't have a lot of those connections. And so I ended up at probably one of the top 2 investment banks straight out of undergrad. And I guess I just figured it out. But then I also think about I had jobs that forced me to socialize. Like I was bussing tables.
Yes.
And my parents, their friends, like we engaged with, like they're like aunts and uncles to me. Like there's, 3 or 4 couples that are not relatives by blood, but they are relatives
by
and
choice.
Like and if they also gave me feedback, if I was acting badly, like that was okay.
Yeah.
And I had aunts and uncles who also gave that feedback as well. And I don't know, I've seen situations where that's not allowed anymore. Like saying like, please and hey, if like I'm around your 10-year-old and let's say I'm a more regular person in their life, not a random person.
Correct.
And like saying like, hey, there's please and thank you. That's not allowed.
Nope.
And that's like to me table stakes.
Yeah.
As like as a pure Gen Xer, I mean, like I consider myself like hardcore Gen X.
Yes.
Right? So for me, giving someone feedback around please and thank you at the age of 10, that
correct.
Can't do that is just bonkers to me.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to say from that. The first is, yes, the brain isn't fully developed until 25, which to me is the reason why this training and coaching and, working internally at companies as well as one-on-one is so important because we still have time. We can really help fix these things as we go. And it's about taking that ownership. the relationships that you're describing as you were growing up and what that looks like, that I could not agree with you more. There's none of that anymore. That's, almost inappropriate if you're disciplining a child that's not yours.
I got chastised by my sister-in-law, and I'm like, well, I think that's a life skill, so we have a disconnect there.
It's funny you say that, because my sister-in-law has come to my defense. If my kids have been disrespecting me and my sister-in-law's there, she will shut it down, and they get embarrassed.
Right.
And I am like, you know what? If you pushed her to the point that she felt like she needed to say something on my behalf, then it's something you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
It takes a village,
yes,
right,
it does.
Jill?
Yes.
It really takes a village. But I think what Jonathan Haidt's, there was something that really spoke to me when I listened to him a lot.
And we'll link to the book in the show notes. We'll link to this book.
So what he did was he brought together a bunch of anywhere between 45 and 50-year-olds who had kids, and he said to them, "How old were you when your parents let you go just out the front door and go play? How old do you think you were?" And everyone's kind of sitting around and being like, I don't know, like 6, 7. Yeah. And he's like, yeah. He's like, now let me ask you this. How old are you letting your children go outside and play?
That's amazing.
And everyone's like 11, 10, 12, and everyone's sitting in the same. He's like, that's like 5 years of time that children could be out there. He's like, there's no white van sitting on the corner getting ready to kidnap your children. The likelihood that is happening is so minimal, but the opportunity that your kids are losing by going outside and being. And when I read that, and I had at that time, she was 7, and she asked me to go ride her bike to school. And I was like, yeah, go, do it, no phone, no. And the thing is, when you said I'm a hardcore Gen Xer, I'm a hardcore Gen Xer too, because we were problem solvers. We came home. We didn't necessarily have our parents home. We could go out the front. Latchkey kids.
TV dinners.
We would go be with our friends. Our parents wouldn't even know where we were. They just knew that we would be coming home. We had landlines, so we had to connect with adults in that kind of way, because if you were calling a friend, you would have to probably, we didn't know for sure if the mom or dad would pick up, but then you'd have to have, "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. This is Heather. May I please speak to?" And we were put in these positions with adults, but also we had to problem solve without our phones, without anything. And that is why that's how we manage, Jill. We manage those who report into us. We manage of the perspective of figure out the solution, then come to me. Then we can talk it out. But you need to problem solve this before you just come to me and tell me that there's a problem.
I love that you said that, because I call myself a recovering product leader. So I used to, lead product management teams. And the whole thing is that you start with the customer pain point and you work backwards. Literally, that's how you do it. You don't start with a solution looking for a problem. You start with, what is the customer suffering from? What is their ailment? What is their problem? And we'd just be like, all right, what's happening here? And, you have to figure it out, playing kickball on the street, and if someone was safe or out, you had to figure it out, and
conflict resolution,
all of this stuff, right? And I think I want to move on to another topic, but the one thing I want to say about the age thing, which I think is a fascinating insight, is that I think about when we were kids, we didn't have play dates.
No.
There wasn't a thing called a play date. And I remember all of a sudden, and I don't know if it was in the 90s, as some of my friends, late 90s, as some of my friends were having kids, people were talking about play dates. And I was like, what the fuck is a play date?
What the fuck? Play dates and friend groups. That we didn't have friend groups growing up.
I mean, I was just literally sitting there and being like, what is a play date? I just played with the kids on my block or in the area. And then sometimes because the hometown I grew up in, had a pretty decent radius and like you couldn't ride your bikes everywhere. Maybe like your parents would like drive you there or something, but I wouldn't call it a play date. It was just like, hey, I'm friends with Heather and she lives in like a different neighborhood that's like probably too far for me to bike ride. So can you drive me over to Heather's after school, so we can hang out or play or whatever, or drive us to the mall so we could go, do mall things, right?
Mall things. I know. The mall is another. It's like part of the fabric of our lives, but it embedded social, emotional learning. And without the phone and without that technology, it's, it's just gone. It's lost. These kids, I don't know if you've ever gone to a mall, they sit and they're on their phones, so they're missing it.
No, I mean, my sister worked at Foot Locker for many years.
Love Foot Locker.
Right. And then I always worked because I wanted, and we'll get to the money thing, is that I was very like driven by like, I want to be able to spend my money and do what I want with my money. Like from a very early age, I took over my brother's paper route at the age of 10 and technically the age was 11, but I was like, I want that. I was talking to a friend recently who actually was just on the show. And she was telling me how kids really don't have a good sense of money because everything is Venmo. Yes. And so they don't have cash. So like when I worked at this convenience store, I had to count back the money to you in terms of the change, right? You give me a 20, it's $16.34, right? Yep. I'm counting back, all right, 66 cents back, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Yep.
Right? Like those skills.
Like there's also just like this physicalness, right? Of
the
like
physicalness.
The touching and seeing and understanding like how much it is instead of just tapping or saying, hey mom, can you push me $20? Like there's no real understanding.
You're looking at a $20 bill versus a $5 bill versus a $1 bill. And like, I mean, in the US, all those bills are the same size, but you still are like, oh, wow, this is like a $20 bill. And like when you're like 10 years old, that's a BFD for sure.
Totally.
And so I think that's another thing where like I used to get a paycheck, when I was younger. Now, obviously, once I, had graduated college, I was like getting like, direct deposit and stuff. But
you would still, even
get
in
the
direct
check.
deposit, you still got to get
a check.
Right.
Yes, that's right. That's true. I did always get a physical check, even if it was, and you could see it. And I mean, as a matter of fact, when I was working in investment banking, living in New York because the taxes are insane, you would get your bonus.
And it's a city and a state.
Yes, exactly. But the thing is that you would get your bonus and you would automatically subtract 50%. Like that was literally what you did in your head. You're like, okay, this was my bonus for the year. Knock off 50% in taxes. You didn't like think of it. At least most people, you didn't think of it as like, oh, I got this. It's like, I'm taking home this.
Correct. I'm taking home.
My first question is that if we're working backwards from the problem, going back to that, and like parents are dealing with, like, they don't want to deal with the failure to launch syndrome for their kid, right?
Yep.
What should they be working backwards from? Because when they come to you and they're already in the failure to launch situation, there's probably more things that you have to do. And it's like, there's a lot more intervention that's involved. But if you're even talking to like a parent of a high school kid, right? What would you be telling them to be thinking about in terms of skills to start building? Because you build these skills over time. You can't bum rush the skills in at the last minute.
1,000,000%, which is what happens a lot. Like, I'll never forget. I was told a story by someone. I get so many stories now about a parent who like flies from Arizona to Syracuse to do their laundry because their job, they look at it as their mother, they look at their job as to get everything out of that child's way so that they can be super successful in school. And again, that's a major disservice, not to mention the fact that we don't even know what school and education is going to look like in the next 5 years, let alone 10. So here's what I'm going to say about that. Okay. So one of the things that I really try hard to work on with my kids is face-to-face communication, or at the very least, if you are having a problem with a friend, to call them, to talk to them, not to hash it out over text. Now, the problem is that not all kids on the other end want to do that. They would rather hide behind their phones. But if the other parent in the situation is willing to also work together and parenting and say, listen, we need to get our kids talking, it's so incredibly important because they're going into a situation being uncomfortable.
Right.
And we need to keep pushing our kids to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And they are really way too comfortable with too many things. Like they just pick the path of least resistance because the path of least resistance now is just there all the time. It's a click away. There's nothing you need to really, you have to actually work and try. So the first thing I always say is if there is some sort of something going on with your child, middle school, high school, elementary school. I had my 10-year-old once get on the FaceTime with her friend, and the mom was kind of sitting in the background, and so was I, and we let the girls talk just in case it went like way off course. But it was so meaningful for the both of them because then they were able to let it go. Rather, the texts can be shared. It's so toxic. And that to me is a really important thing. Also, make your kid make their haircut appointment if they need it. Make them, if they like manicures, make them get their manicures. If they want to go to dinner, make the dinner reservations. Like make them call, not know who there's going to be on the other line, have to be polite, explain what they need to be done because they don't like, I'm sure you've seen videos of college kids sitting there with their mom to their right being like, okay, what do I ask? What's my, insurance or what is even, and they're like panicking and the parents kind of laughing, but ultimately you have to teach your kid at least once or twice how to do it. And then you back off, right? And say, okay, you've got this. So to me, that's really important. That's number one. Number two is, something, again, I'm doing in my house and working with my kids is, let's just say Hanukkah, okay?
Right.
So what I say to my kids now for Hanukkah is, you have $100. Spend it however you want. So if you want to get one big thing, amen. Right. But if you want to use it in a different way, like here's your budget. Use it how you want to, because then it gives them the understanding of, oh, do I really want that? Is that really worth my money? Do I not want that?
And you probably spend a lot of time at Sephora since you have 3 daughters.
Oh my God, you've no idea. Correct.
Yeah.
But that's like a really great point, Jill, which is, do you want to get 10 products at Sephora or do you want to get one sweatshirt from PacSun? Like, what's worth your money? And they have to make that decision. So and now that I'm really talking and I'm really in the meat of talking to some of these kids about their finances in their 20s, late 20s, like if you never showed them how to do it, then you can't just expect one day to turn off the hose and that they're going to be okay. Like you have to teach them what are their habits? What are their behaviors? What are they spending their money on? Because again, to your point, it's a tap. There's no money being exchanged here. They're not seeing what they're making. It's just tapping. And so really understanding that and the value and what things truly cost is critical to the future of them being successful with their own financial success.
Is there like a tactic that you tell, because it's interesting because you have your parents who are your buyers. So in tech parlance, there's the buyer and there's the user, right? So the parents are the buyer.
More or less. I do have kids who are buyers too, but yeah. Okay.
The kids are typically the users in this.
Yeah.
And so, you're trying to cater to the buyer in terms of the parent. I want the independence. But the
Yes.
user is still not, they have to be brought along in a way that helps them click on this concept. So is there like a tactic on the money thing that you have found that's helpful for someone in college to understand, you don't just spend the money as it comes in?
So I think what is most critical is that just like I'm giving them the budget of $100 for, Hanukkah, like when my kids get to college, like they're going to have only so much and they're going to need to understand and realize what they want to do with it. And also, like to your point of I wanted to make money, my kids are similar. Like they want to they want that financial flexibility to buy what they want to buy.
Yeah.
So, if that means that they get a job at college in some kind of way that, who knows with the world of remote working and
whatever.
Lots of different ways. If they want to make extra money on the side or they come home over their breaks and they want to make money, like then that's just more money for them to be able to spend how they see fit. But, I think being able to maybe on a monthly basis give them the breakdown of what they have spent in college. Like, here's how much you spent on Uber Eats this week.
Oh my God.
Or this month. Here's how much you spent on DoorDash this month. Here's how much, like, think about other ways if you needed to be using that money, if you wanted to, if there was something else that you wanted or needed. I think what happens a lot of time is that the parents don't give any type of insight into what is going on. And so they just tap away and they don't even understand. Like I was at a coffee shop the other day and I heard a mom be like, I mean, my daughter spent $3,000 this month. Like, how is that even possible? And I'm thinking to myself, how does your daughter not, like, how are you not going through all of that?
Yeah, how does she have access to $3,000?
Right, on the credit card.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. It's like,
and there could be limits, right? Like they should know their limit every month or whatever.
Or, and let's say you can't get a credit card limit, like a stratified credit card limit or something like that. You could just sit there and say like, because I know on my Amex, I have like different alerts. And I mean, that's just from my knowledge. I don't have any kids, but it's just, you can easily get an alert to say like, oh, you've spent this much on your card this month. Like,
So I use the Rocket app. Which is something, and it'll ping you and say, you're at your entertainment budget, you're at your, so you can, and again, I think like the more conversation you have with your kids about all of this, the more they're going to be learning. And
I wonder if you could kind of almost as a parenting tactic, because I've never used Rocket, but obviously I've heard of it, is almost gamify it. You put in incentives for like how much you're saving per month.
Yep.
And you do it that way and you kind of gamify it and you put in incentives for, your child to be like, hey, if you hit these things, like your daughter's working. Okay. But you probably also want to teach her to save money as well.
Yep.
Right. So it's kind of like, okay, it's great that you have the money to go and buy whatever at Lulu or, Sephora, whatever. Paxson, that's the other that I've never heard of, but that's not surprising. But it's more of you saying like, okay, like, great, you have the money to spend this, but what if we started teaching you about saving? And here's an example, like when there's a leak in the house.
Oh, yeah.
We have to like, that's the type of expense that generally you have to go into your savings and dig out for.
Yep.
Right. And so I wonder if there's just a way that maybe there's like a gamification type of thing that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, first of all, you're a product manager, so look at you go. Like you're already thinking. You're thinking.
We can brainstorm this.
Yeah. Right. I love it. And I'm 100% sure. But like, and then the other problem to me, it's like the real, like, why aren't they teaching this in school?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with my sister about this, and she was, because we were talking about something, and I said they don't teach economics and like basics of personal finance in school anymore. She's like, no. And this is public school. Right.
Anymore. I don't really know. I mean, unless you're in the business or finance major, you're not getting any kind of.
But I mean, this is in high school. Like I had an economics class. in my
Yeah.
public high school. Mr. Dowd, I think, was my teacher, who I'm still friends with on Facebook.
I love it.
But we learned some of this stuff. But I agree, in college, there's none of that. That's not in like the life skill. They're not interested in teaching you that unless you actively seek that out.
Correct. And kids are not actively seeking it out because that they're going to get 0 credits for it. And so they would rather spend their time focusing on other things that, you know, and understandably so. But to me, I think every single college student should be in some sort of life skills class before they graduate college that really breaks down things and gives them, you know, it might put me out of business, but I think it's just such a critical exercise. And to your point, like the saving piece too. And what about investing? And I talk a lot about the 401k and like why right when you get out of school, like I always say, if there's one thing only you take out of all of my content, like just start your 401k.
Oh my God.
Right when you graduate.
My parents, I will just say, have not managed their money that well, but that was the one good piece of financial advice. I've gotten a lot of great life advice, particularly from my dad, but from my parents. But the one piece of financial advice that he gave me that has turned out very well for me is max out your 401k contributions every year.
Yeah, because it's free money you're leaving on the table.
Yeah, because a lot of times there's matching and everything else. And so literally, like my IRA, because obviously you have to roll over your 401k once you leave a job, right? Is a very significant part of our portfolio, if you can imagine, for working in corporate for 30 years.
Yep.
I haven't been able to contribute to a 401k since I've started Go Long, because obviously it's a different structure. But just think of 30 years of maxing out, and that's with some downturns in there. Of your 401k. Right?
I show them the graph of like, if you were to start this in your 20s and what it would look like, if you were to start this in your 30s and what it would look like, and then if you were to start in your 40s. So it's really
maybe you need to do an online course on Maven or something to kind of go along with.
I know there's so many things I've got going on in my head for products.
Maybe you need an accountability coach if you only knew someone.
Totally.
Now, let's say you have, so, you know, we talked about like the money skills and the working back skills. And, you know, one thing, you kind of alluded to it with like the crazy story of the mom flying from Arizona to Syracuse. But the one skill, I had Kim Oser, our friend Kim from Game Plan Organizing. Also Need Another You on Instagram. She said the one skill that she tells parents as they're packing their kids for college is that they need to learn how to do laundry. In high school, they should be doing their own laundry. And I also think from when I was in college, the laundry room was also a very big social experiment in the dorm room. Like, oh, someone left their shit in the washer and they haven't moved it to the dryer, like, or someone cut in line. Like, I mean, there's all these like little conflict situations that you have to learn to navigate.
1,000,000%. And yes, my 16-year-old does her own laundry, and that is like a definite basic life skill that they need to understand. But I do also think when they are embarking, you know, into college, just having that proactive conversation with them about like what the money, you know, how much money you're willing to help support them versus how much they might need to find on their own based on what they want to do.
So you talked a bit earlier about neurodiversity.
Yes.
And there's more diagnoses, and I think that's because I don't think there's an epidemic. I think that obviously the criteria has been more established in terms of how you identify, right? Someone who
there's a spectrum.
Yeah, there's a spectrum. So I mean, so the thing is that, so I'm guessing you have more neurodiverse clients, as in, and parents and kids for that matter. I mean, I actually interviewed a therapist who focuses on women over 40 being diagnosed with ADHD. So, I mean, there's that.
Oh, yes.
But then I interviewed a friend and a former colleague where she has ADHD, something called pure OCD, which is like a very specific diagnosis. And I believe she also has a form of autism. And her kids have been diagnosed. And so the thing is that how she works with the school system, obviously is a challenge. But my question to you is that for a parent who has a kid who's on the spectrum, and obviously that spectrum is very big in terms of being like, self-functioning versus not.
Yes.
How do you approach that in terms of the skills?
I think that, and I've worked with a lot of different young adults that are on the spectrum. I think probably the biggest challenge for them is that they're not big emoters. And so when they're interviewing, they stay pretty level set. There's not a lot that you're getting from them. And I actually, I'd like to talk to people, in recruiting and talent management more about this, because these are brilliant individuals, but perhaps their interviewing game isn't as, as successful, if you will.
It's not as sharp.
And no, it's not. And also it's just so hard right now because the market is so challenging. So,
right.
So what I suggest to really all of my students, but especially those who are neurodiverse, is I like for them to send an email prior to the interview. And now I could get a lot of people listening to this and being like, but if they write them prior to the interview, then they can already discriminate against them. And if they're discriminating against them, then that's not the right company for you. But I believe if you give someone a heads up in the sense of like this, hi, I'm Heather. I'm really looking forward to our conversation on Thursday. I know we're going to be limited in time. So I wanted to give you some feedback about who I am. And so that before you even get on the call, a little bit about me. And, go into some of your professional maybe and your personal, things that you like to do, hobbies, books, whatever podcast you're listening to, make it engaging. And then at the end, just say, I have been told, my feedback is I'm not really great at emoting, but please know that when we're talking, I'm very excited and interested in this role. I might just not show it like everybody else does. Mm-hmm. So you're not saying anything, but what you're doing is you're giving the interviewer the heads up on how to go into the call and be like, wow, okay, now I know all these things about them. And maybe it helps the interviewer break the ice with that person being like, oh, well, I loved that movie too that you just saw, and talk about it. And then it gets that interviewer to warm up. I do believe as a recruiter, and this is something in my industry that frustrates me to my core, is that my job is not to make the person across from me feel so uncomfortable and awkward and nervous because they're interviewing for my company. And that's it's like an ego, hierarchy thing. No, my belief is that a really good recruiter and interviewer is going to make the other person feel so comfortable on the other end that they leave feeling like they knocked it out of the park either way.
Right.
And I can make my own evaluation based on the role and based on what the expectations are. But I want every single person who talks to me feeling good about their experience, period, end of statement. Not well, they're in this place of control. And so I have to, because that's where the awkwardness starts in general. Then you put someone who's on the spectrum in there, and it's just, they bottle up and they're not doing their best, if you will.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. I also think that maybe the person may not be the right fit for that role.
Yeah.
And I may move on to another place, and that person may be a better fit for
another role.
And so I always go into an interview thinking I'm selling. I mean, I'm still going to ask you questions, right?
And the thing is, companies don't sell enough.
But regardless of the market, because I've recruited in both types of markets.
Yeah.
I feel like you always want to be selling. You're representing the company. And this was even before you had Glassdoor and Levels and everything else where people can just sit there and just
Yep.
put things out there, right?
Yep.
And so I always feel like, you want to sell, and, you want to sell by asking insightful questions, right? Because it showcases the types of problems that go in there. I also try and tell my recruiter, like, hey, tell them that this is what I focus on, and I'm going to be looking at the questions they ask me as part of, because I feel like a lot of times in the interview, people feel like, okay, let's say I've interviewed you and you're like, okay, cool, I'm done. But then I'm actually evaluating the types of questions that you're asking me as part of my evaluation. Like, it's not like you're not an easy street. So let's talk about, let's say someone gets the job.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of disconnect, particularly over these past 5 years, right? And even before then, as we talked about at the top of the call, around skills that hardcore Gen Xers like us assume that Gen Zers have that they don't have. So I'd love to be able to talk about that a little bit, to at least get people to look at this a little bit differently if they're not already.
Yeah. So one of the trainings that I teach at companies is called Generational Differences in the Workforce, so that you're really understanding the breakdown of each generation, why we are the way we are, and how to truly bridge this gap. And part of what I say when I talk to companies is, listen, like, I can help your Gen Zers, but like, you got to get the rest of the company on board, because it's just as much their responsibility. And the truth is, Jill, like, we screwed them up. Like, we did.
Right.
It's our fault.
Right. We're the parents.
We're the parents. This is what we created. So then we blame them. And they, in my trainings, I'll always ask my Gen Zers, like, what do you think is like your biggest stereotype? The first thing they all say is that we're lazy, that we're not resilient. Like, they know they're not, like, they know, and they're actually not lazy, and they are very resilient considering all of the things that they have experienced in their short lifetimes. But, again, because these skills aren't being developed along the way as much as they should be, when they do hit corporate, we have to spell out those unspoken rules that we know to be the unspoken rules, but they don't. First of all, so, like, let me give you a great example. I have a client who their company was going from hybrid to on-site 4 days a week. Okay. So she has a meeting with all of her Gen Zers about this, this change. And one of the young adults said, well, there were two questions. One was, well, if it's cold out, do we have to come to work still? Can we just work from home? And the other was...
Is this in Chicago?
This is in Chicago.
So it gets pretty freaking cold.
Right, it does.
Yeah.
So they want to know, if it's too cold, do we have to come to work? And if we're at work every day, like, do you pay for our lunch every day? And you and I could have a really good chuckle about both of those questions, right? Because we know exactly the answers. But they don't. Like, they legit don't. They're not looking to ask a stupid question. They're actually wondering, like, well, we've been working like this way all along. Now you're making me come in the office. Like, if it's too cold out, like, do I really have to come, or can I just work from home that day? So, and if I'm, I'm making my little lunches at home, but like, you're making me come down to the city, what do I really have to pay for lunch every day now too? And my commute and things, again, that we're just, that we, like,
am I getting a raise now that I have to commute? Am I getting a raise?
Correct. So Gen Z wants to know the why behind everything. They want to understand. So at a company, I always tell my CEOs or my managers, the best way for you to manage Gen Z is to explain the reason behind the decision. Don't just tell them it's the decision, go for it. You're going to lose them. But if you explain why, it shows them the impact that they are creating, which all they want to feel is their impact. They also believe, differently from other generations, that a promotion or a raise comes in a certain amount of time, typically within a year or two. And you and I know it could take 3 to 5 years to get like
Right.
that real promotion, but they expect that growth faster. And we grew up on, well, it's about the loyalty, and it's about, not only, how hard they're working, and they don't look at loyalty anymore because they saw their parents have jobs for their whole lives and then get laid off.
Right.
Or, and so there's no like sense of loyalty. At this point in resumes, I see 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years. But if you're looking at someone that's been at the same company for 10 years, it's not as interesting to companies anymore. And the loyalty is not part of the promotion. It's about what their performance is. And then there's breakdowns in how often managers are providing performance reviews and really, able to engage. So again, like there's so much that Gen Z has to learn because we never taught them, and it's our responsibility to create and have these trainings for them. Even if it seems asinine to us, it's really fruitful and interesting and important for them in order to be successful. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, you could have a laugh about it. But yeah, if you haven't been taught that, going back to really what we've been talking about on this whole episode is that being taught this. And so if there's never been a conversation that, either parent like pays for lunch or this or that, and that hasn't been explicitly stated, it just happens, then your kid is not going to know that. And if they haven't had internships because of, say, COVID or whatever that is, they're not going to know that. And if they're working virtually, like let's say, someone has an internship working virtually for someone, right? Then like my nephew worked virtually for me for that matter, right?
Yep.
He may not know when going in. Now he's had in-person jobs since, but the point is that if it's not explicitly stated, they're not going to know. And
Correct.
Most parents aren't going to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, I have to go and I'm going into the office and I'm paying for lunch. Like you're probably not having that conversation. You may be talking about what you're doing,
Yep.
but you're not talking about the mechanics of what makes your workday
Yep.
actually happen. And I think that's what
Yep.
you're trying to talk about is like you need to explain the mechanics of what happens behind the scenes of making your workday a workday.
And also, Gen X we don't have work boundaries. We're all just workhorses. It's kind of ingrained in us. That is not Gen Z. They are not workhorses. They're tapping out at 5 o'clock. And I think it's one of the biggest frustrations between the two generations is that. And what I say is, why are we such workhorses? Like, why can't we turn it off? That's a problem. I think that there has to be, to me, it's everything in moderation.
Yeah.
I am actually like, if I had to go on my soapbox, I would say hybrid to me is the most beautiful model that you could have. It gives you the autonomy to work from home how you want to. It also brings you into the office with people and collaborating and connecting, which is also equally as important.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, from a working perspective, Gen X like really expects like that grind, and Gen Z isn't. They're not grinding like that. That's just not who they are.
But I think the one thing, and I'll close out on this, is that a lot of things that I talk about with my clients is around like the fallacy of multitasking and always being on, and how that actually detracts from the quality of work that you're doing. And so I feel like if there's a way that Gen Z can talk about the fact that they can be just as productive without having to be on all the time, right? There's that. I also think obviously Gen Z doesn't have kids at this point typically. So they're not doing the, hey, I'm doing my school pickup at like 3 o'clock and then I'm getting back online. So I think there's also that disconnect as well, is that like there are a number of like, say, working parents, working moms in particular, and I have some of them as clients where it's like, okay, I'm off between 3 and 4:30 because I'm doing school pickup and coaching my kids' soccer. So I'm getting back online later, and it's giving that impression that they're always on, where the reality is that they're like, look.
Right.
So I think there's also those both ways that's happening, where there's not that understanding of like, hey, when you're a parent, you still have to get your work done. And that means that, but you want to be involved in your kid's life. So that means that like you're not available between 3 and 4:30 for meetings because that is kid pickup time, right?
Yep.
All right. So Heather, this has been such a great conversation. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. That's where the bulk of my content is, Adulting 101 Masterclass. I also am on TikTok, but I provide a little bit more, just more resources on Instagram. I have a website, Adulting 101 Masterclass. And again, I do one-on-one coaching for those who are college grads, rising college grads, as well as 20s and early 30s is where my range is. And
you're also on
that's where you
LinkedIn.
can find me. Oh, yes.
I'm like, why hadn't she mentioned LinkedIn yet?
I am. I'm on LinkedIn too.
All right. Well, Heather, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
Oh
you
my
are
gosh.
the best. You are the best.
Truly. I appreciate that. I want to thank our audience for tuning in. If you want to be able to ask questions of upcoming guests, sign up for Go Long for the paid version of the Substack or become a coaching client. Go Long is a micro accountability texting service where I give you nudges every day so that you can make time to do the things that you want to do, like setting up an online course on Maven, for example. If you look at the show notes, there's all the different ways you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. This show is also on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, so please feel free to subscribe and like. This show is edited by John Richardson and produced by Go Long. And I am really happy that you have made the time to listen to this show. So remember, it's your life. Go the distance. Go long.